run the length of the ship to get an idea of what the layout is.
Right.
And it was a very Jonathan Archer moment when he slid down.
Yes, it was. It was pretty awesome.
Yes.
And, because we been able to see kind of how the ship looks? Yeah, because we saw it up against when Seven came and saved them. So we see size scale a little bit, but I don't know what that really means. Like now, like you said, we saw someone run the length, so I get it. I can get to the back of this ship in 7 seconds. Like
it's a small ship,
right? It's a shuttle pod. I mean, it's just a slightly larger shuttle pod.
Yeah,
and, so that was cool. But then moving forward at the end of the episode, we have where Will sits down on the end of that pier, which was really cool, and puts his arm. And again, this is something that Karen brought up last episode. When Hugh touches Picard, that's the first time we really see someone physically touch Picard throughout any of these episodes. And there's kind of a change. He's not so disconnected after that moment. He becomes more human and more caring, compassionate, all the things that Deanna told him he needed to become. And now he's with old friends, and he's becoming even more so that. But at the end of this episode, Will sits down with him and puts his arm around his shoulder, which I thought was an awesome scene because now I think back to, okay, this all started. The only reason why this can happen now is because we had the card game in the last episode of TNG. And, but so because of that, we have this scene where he turns to him and he says, you could sit this one out. Like, no one would be upset about you. You've saved the galaxy enough. By the way, everyone's upset at you for sitting the last 14 years out. So don't believe Will. He's lying. But when no one will blame you for it, I get it. I get what he's saying. He goes, except for me, which was an awesome line.
That whole scene was great. We don't get to see, we very rarely ever get to see Picard in a moment where he's vulnerable and intimate with a friend. They weren't sitting there as first officer and captain. They were sitting there as friends. And I don't think we've ever really seen a moment where they're friends like that because they've always been in their uniforms.
With the exception of the card game, I would agree. Like it's always been, commander and subordinate relationship.
Right. But even in that card game, it was just a hint that it was going to happen.
Correct. And now we're getting to see the payoff.
Now we're getting to see. Yeah. And
it took 30 years, but it's awesome.
I was just going to say it took them way too long. I remember writing StarTrek.com saying, please don't stop at Nemesis. We need a conclusion to these characters. Right? So it's a dream come true on a lot of levels. But but to see that happen and then to have the arm up and around, and not only just Will's arm around, but Picard's hand is up and like holding his hand almost. Yes. So there's a true intimacy between the two of them. It was a beautiful thing to see.
Picard, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, you take out the additional points that you made, where he's saying, hey, you shouldn't have done it. I told you you'd have been stuck with Romulans and, you'd be dealing with this for the rest of your life. But hey, man, it's okay. We know what's going on with you. And you have limited time left, so if you need to chill, no one's going to have a problem with you. It's all right. I mean, who can tell you if your best friend can't?
Right, and his best friend goes, but I'd still blame you, which was awesome because he knows it's not Picard to just sit it out. He couldn't just sit it out, and he even says, like, oh, man, there's so much in that scene where...
That moment right before that scene there at the dinner table, and Picard says, I have a mission and no one can stop me now that I have a mission.
Which, okay, so we didn't talk about, there's so much more to still talk about. We're already an hour and 20 minutes in. So those two scenes, take just those two scenes out of this episode, right? And he says to Soji, check my heart rate, check my dilating pupils, blah, 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 because he knows that she has sensors to pick all this stuff up and to know he's not lying, right? Whether she's lying or not.
Right.
But none of that worked.
She saw the loophole. Right.
Until he said, no one's going to stop me. And then I believe she really started to trust him at that moment.
At that moment, she realized he had skin in the game.
Right. And not in a negative way towards her.
Right.
Well,
I mean, she's lived her whole life hating synths. They established this with Daj, and maybe in this episode, they glaze over it a little bit, but her perception of what synthetic, I can't say the word, synthetic organisms would be negative. So she's just sitting there looking at this guy saying, I accept you for who you are and what you are. I love you. You're from a dear friend of mine. And she's thinking in the back of her head, you're just lying to me.
Right. And now
I understand that you think you're telling me the truth.
Right. And I love that line. She goes, but it doesn't mean you are telling me the truth.
It was
and Riker was going to get mad. And Picard was like, wait, I got this. And once he gave that line, I feel like there was really turning her attitude on what he was saying. Plus, let's be real, she has been hearing constantly about Data from everybody she's running into. So clearly they all love Data, right? Whether they're telling her the truth or not, they do not lie. They're not lying about Data because all the stories are bolstering the next story that comes.
But Data means something to us as a viewer. It means nothing to her as a character.
No, but I think she sees that Data means something to all of them as a family.
Yeah. To me, my impression of that, and I don't disagree with you, it could be that way, but to me, my impression would be is if you had like an uncle that was never mentioned, you know,
right?
Like somebody who was a family member who, you know, somebody says, you know, Uncle Bert, insert sentence about their life, and you're like, I don't even know who that is.
Right. No, and I don't think the two items can't exist in tandem because she still doesn't have to care about Data per se, but it can help her believe that they're not lying to her because of their care for Data. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
So I think they can both exist. Those two options can coexist. I really don't care about Data. I've never met him. I don't know who he is. He died 20 years ago.
But you keep talking about him.
You
so
say
maybe
he's my father, right? But I'm a robot, so that's impossible, physically impossible. Because she's really more of like a clone, kind of, because they took his memories and whatever. Yeah. We can get into that.
Well, I'm not really sure exactly what that is yet. I'm waiting for them to explain that to me.
Me too, but it's they're going to use it as father-daughter kind of.
They are.
But it could be spun a totally different way. But anyway.
I'm confused about the whole positronic thing anyway in this episode.
Yeah, they threw that in there, but that was a callback to Enterprise, the silicone-based disease for their son, who would have been 18 this year. We didn't get into any of that, nope. And then I still didn't even finish the end of Riker's scene with him, where Picard says, "Thank you for not trying to stop." Thank you, and he goes, "Oh, you know, I'm always here for you." He goes, "I mean, not for not talking me out of this." And he goes, "I would know that would have been useless." Because once Picard has set his mind, it's over. He's doing it.
Well, that's why I brought up the scene where Picard said, "Now I have a mission. No one will stop me." Right. He's sitting there as his best friend, looking at his mentor, a father figure, and closest confidant, right? And when you see somebody who you know is dying, who you know is getting ready to do something that you're not, you know, physically able to do, and they're not up to it. Maybe he's up to it, but he's not up to it like he would have been 20 years ago.
Right.
And he says, I'm going to do it no matter what. He knows he can't talk him out of it. But as a good friend will always say the hard thing. And the hard thing is, maybe you shouldn't, and it's okay if you don't.
Yeah, I guess.
That's how I took it.
Even in saying that, he says, but I'll blame you.
But I'll blame you.
Because he knows he's going to do it anyway. So I'm going to tell you that nobody else wants you to do this, but you're going to have my blessings in going because I don't want you thinking you don't.
Do you think that Riker really blamed him?
No, I think Riker would blame him. No, but I think what he meant was not necessarily the last 14 years, but for the next action. To do nothing now, I'd blame you because I know the kind of man you are.
Yeah.
Not because it's your duty or because you have to, but because I know who you are. You've seen this, and I know there's no stopping you. So if you stop who you are, then I don't know who you are anymore.
Now I'm going to go into Dreamland for a minute because one of my takeaways from this scene was when they walked down onto that pier, onto that dock, and Picard asked Riker, have you ever thought about going back up again? Right?
Which was an awesome scene.
It was good. And Riker said, I'm on active reserve but it would take a pretty damn good reason to get me to go back up there. So I said to my wife, I said, what if Picard gets himself in a situation that he can't get himself out of, and season 2 is Riker going back to a ship to go and save his friend, because now the Federation has realized there is problems. They have to get involved.
Anything is possible, because they did set it up where he can go back. And again, back to the military point, when your contract is over, I know my contract, I don't know every contract, but mine had a certain time of inactive reserves. So he was active reserve. Some contracts are you do active duty, then reserve, then inactive reserve. But so he's in that last stage where if he gets 2 years or whatever it is, he's done for good. He's out. He's retired. But,
right.
Which I thought was interesting because he still has an active rank because he's active reserves.
Oh, his whole compound about like shields up, cloaking device, all of that stuff. There's something weird going on there to have that type
all
of
that in your house. Yeah. Yeah, which is cool. I just want to touch really quick on their son who passed. I thought it was interesting to go that route for them, that their son had this disease that, it was a silicone-based disease, so it's a throwback to Enterprise. And again, but if you don't know that, it doesn't affect the episode. It doesn't ruin the episode. Like, what is a silicone? Who cares? It's Star Trek, it's technobabble. If you don't know everything through. But the fact that they fleshed out this character, and I think they did that. I think they fleshed out a character who we'll never see. Because, again, I'm going back to this point where she sees the way they're talking about Data and their son in the same kind of way.
Well, we wouldn't have believed that the character had any weight had they not fleshed the character out as much as they did. That was the first thing that I kind of thought, establishing all of the stuff, the languages, the picture.
Which was awesome. He came up with 12 because he didn't have a homeworld. And, again, building on that whole homeworld idea so that she'll give them information that helps them find her homeworld for her,
Yes. There was a touching moment, because, at the table she used the word that Thaddeus had designated for homeworld.
Oh,
yeah.
And I don't... Ogin or whatever it was in one of his languages.
You could see, like, if you look at that scene, like, Riker looks surprised that she knows the word, and Deanna looks very sad that it came up. Like, every moment that, like, Marina Sirtis is so good in this episode because you could just feel her heart breaking. Like before she walked into his room, she had to stop and take a breath, and then she opened the door to go in.
And worse, again, that's another scene where Picard puts his foot in his mouth.
Yes.
He makes a very... Oh, that must be really hard for you to see that happening. Like, the fact that it's getting easier for Kestra.
Yeah, and
what
he's
are
like...
you doing, bro? And she immediately just changes the subject to, like, you're allowed to stay here forever. Like...
Yeah. No, she smiled and said, "It really is so good to see you," which to me, that feels like a... Thank you so much for saying that to me.
Yeah, just twist the dagger clockwise.
Right. But they did a great job of fleshing that character out, and a character we're never going to see. And it wouldn't have, to just mention it wouldn't have meant anything if they hadn't put some weight behind it.
No, I agree. But I think it also goes to show, all right, they're talking about this father of mine in the same reverence they're talking about their own child who died. They can't be lying to me, at least about Data. Everything else can be whatever it is, but they can't be lying to me about Data. And then for the daughter to, like, be texting under the table, that's so 2020. And and getting the answer from this commander who's on Lost Lake or whatever they call it over there.
Yeah, I didn't write down. Yeah, I don't know, but I can't find it.
Yeah, but
Inside Straight.
Because they were just talking about someone, and they're like, he doesn't have a ship, he's broken, the ship's broken, like, and then he still comes up with the answer.
Yes.
That they need.
I think we're going to get to see that person.
I think so too. And that might be when Riker gets back into space. It might not be through Starfleet. He might use his credentials, but he might get back into space with that guy. And I don't know. Did you watch the coming attractions?
So at the end of my episode,